coming at you with another lesson today. Today we're doing some social studies. Um, as you recall, we've been talking about the causes of the American Revolution and what started that war for independence. Um, we have worked through some of this packet already. We're going to be doing some of this as we go over the next week or two, unless I find something better in the meantime. But we've talked about the French and Indian War. We talked about the Proclamation of 1763, as well as I think we did briefly discuss the Quartering Act. Yeah, we did. We talked about the Quartering Act, about how the British soldiers could just come into anybody's home that they wanted, and we wrote about that on this deal here. So we're going to start with the Stamp Act today. I think we may have briefly mentioned this, but we did not do the activity for it, I know. So the Stamp Act of 1765. So our sheet here, it says, King George III and Parliament agreed that the colonists would pay taxes on all printed material to help pay for the French and Indian War. Colonists were angry. Since they had a self-government, they thought Parliament had no right to tax them. So we did discuss this in class, that at that time the colonists were starting to govern themselves, and they didn't really answer to Parliament or to the king as much, and he was so far away. He was all the way across the ocean. At this point in time, these are people that were not born in England. These are not people that came over on boats to stay in the Americas. These are people that were born here. So they didn't feel the same kind of loyalty that some of the other people did who were actually from England. But they were all under the king. So you start to see these problems arise. And we talked about how, a little bit about taxes and about how that works. And we do know that, like, at this time, the king is just trying to basically refill his wallet. Okay, he's used all this money, he spent all this money on the French and Indian War, or the 7 Years' War, and he's trying to refill all and make all that money back, basically. And the colonists are the ones that are having to pay for it, and they're not happy about it at all. I do have an activity that goes with this. I've also got a slideshow here that I want to just briefly go through before I get you guys started on your actual classwork. So the Stamp Act, what was it? Okay, it was a tax put on the American colonies by the British in March 22nd, 1765. All public documents, newspapers, magazines, legal documents, anything that was a print material had to be taxed. Okay, and this did not make people happy. They're like, why are we having to pay even more taxes now? It just seems like it was this, what we call a snowball effect, where it just becomes more and more and more for them to deal with. For example, when your parents go to work, if they say, oh, you're going to make $5,000 a month, which is a lot of money, but if Mr. Avery don't make that, but $5,000 a month, well, they may only bring home $3,000 or $3,500. Okay, well, where does that other $1,500 to $2,000 go? It goes in taxes back to the government to help pay for public services. Okay, so taxes help pay for, and we've talked about this too, it helps pay for your school, for the roads, for the street lights, for all these things that the public uses, that's for the good of all, or at least that's what it's designed to be. But anyway, so this was another tax, and then they're really starting to add up for these people. Okay, and it says, how did it come to be? And we talked about this. The French and Indian War was won by the American colonies with the help of the British Army. In return for their help, though, the British government wanted the colonists to help pay for the troops and that were still staying in America, and that kind of crosses over with the Quartering Act. We're not going to do the amendment. We're not quite there yet. We already said that it was helped to pay for the French and Indian War. All right, I want you to pause the video for just a second, and I've got a question for you. So if you were a colonist, what would you be thinking at this time? As soon as this was put into play, what would you be thinking? What are your thoughts on all this, on this tax? So stop, think, and discuss if somebody's with you. All right, so let's take a look here. What did they think? Well, they thought they had no right to tax them because the colonies were not represented in the British Parliament by the British government. So the British government was making all these decisions, and they were trying to govern the colonies, but nobody from the colonies had a seat on the Parliament. So nobody from the colonies had a say on what was happening. And that made them very angry. They had no representation within the British government. They were basically just telling them what to do all the time. And that was the saying, that was the famous saying, this was coined: taxation without representation. You're taxing us and making us pay all this money, but we don't even get a choice on what happens here, okay? Or the laws, or what's taxed, or what the money's spent on, any of that stuff, okay? So my next slide is like, what do you think they did? What do you think the colonists' response was to this? Okay, so what did the colonists do as a result of this? Stop and think. All right, let's take a look here. What did the colonists do? They protested. They refused it. They burned the stamped paper. They boycotted British products and merchants. This means that boycott means that they decided they would not use or buy any products that were made by the British. Okay, so they got mad and they started to do something about it. And you'll see how that kind of plays out as we move forward. All right, what happened after that, guys? They called a meeting of the colonies. They gathered to form the Stamp Act Congress, and they prepared a unified protest, which means they all got together and protested at the same time against the Stamp Act. Okay, a group called the Sons of Liberty also contributed, and they basically took to the streets. Okay, they took to the streets and they protested it. They intimidated the tax collectors so much that they resigned from their jobs. So there were these guys that used to go around and try to collect the taxes, like an actual person would go around and say, you have to pay this to me. You know, the tax collectors were hated. Guys, they were hated so much. They used to pour black tar on them and then cover them in feathers. And I'm not making that up, okay? They would tar and feather those people, okay, to humiliate them and to punish them for what they'd done. Okay, so here's what we're going to do next. I have got a Google form ready to go. Now, I've changed this a little bit, so you have to read it on the Google form, and actually I'm going to show you that. But this was the next step in our little packet that we had, but I have put it into Google form. So this is what you guys are going to see as your response. You're going to have to do an opinion writing. It says your teacher's running out of supplies. He decided to tax you on any supplies you use in her. I'm not a her. Okay, I'm a his. In his classroom. Pencils, notebook, paper, construction paper, glue sticks, erasers, all that stuff. He will use some of the tax money to pay for supplies for the class, but also will keep for himself, will keep some for himself to keep his car washed and professionally clean. So I've got to have a nice clean car, y'all. So I'm going to use some of your tax money to do that because I'm in charge. Okay, and that's how this works. So I want you to just think for a minute. Do you think this is fair? Okay. Write a letter to me to express your thoughts. What would you say to me in your letter about this whole situation here in this section? Okay, so you're going to write a letter, dear Mr. Airy, and then tell me what you think. It needs to be at least be a paragraph, and get that done and submit it to me. I'm very interested to see what some of you have to say. And that is it for now. Enjoy the rest of your day and enjoy giving me the business in your letter there. See ya.